Lovely. Welcome all. Thank you, all the early birds. We're just going to give another couple of minutes waiting for everyone else to join in, and then I'll give us all a nice introduction then, and let you guys know what you've signed up to. Just to let you all know, this is being recorded, so if you're happy to keep your mics off and if you've got any questions, don't feel bad about using the chat or raising your hand to ask us anything. Okay, lovely. I think we'll kick off then, just because 5:30. So thank you everyone for turning up and signing on to this. Just want to thank you all for joining us really for the first of our series for these termly industry evening talks. Like I said, I'm not sure, I think I've admitted one or two more people in. It is being recorded. If it's up to you guys if you want to keep your cameras off or on. Any questions, feel free to raise your hand or use the chat box and we'll get back. Try to answer you as quick as we can. So my name is Brandon Jones. I'm the skills manager for a company called CSconnected. So for those of you who may be new to CSconnected or may not have heard of us before, we are the world's first compound semiconductor cluster, and we're based just in South Wales. The cluster is largely based in Newport, so very close to home for most of you. So our cluster kind of brings together academic institutions, cutting edge research, leading academic institutions in research, industry leaders, and we drive innovation within compound semiconductors. These technologies are critical to a wide range of applicants, including advanced communications, renewable energy, medical devices, and the new electric vehicles that are currently coming out. At CSconnected, our mission doesn't just stick to, what can we do in terms of compound semiconductors, but we're also looking at kind of inspiring and developing the next generation, or you guys that have joined this call, to see if we can push you to get into this industry. It's a worldwide industry. It could take you all over the world, and it's a really exciting industry if we can get your front foot in the door. Like I said, we're the world's first compound semiconductor cluster, so South Wales is actually at the forefront of this industry. Whether you're interested in chemistry, physics, engineering, or even if you're looking at business roles and things like that, these companies need everything to run. So it doesn't just focus on the engineering side. There's a lot of other professions you can get into this industry with. Less from me. Tonight we've got honored to be presented by Professor Owen Guy. So Owen is the head of chemistry at Swansea University, and he's our guest speaker. He's a leading expert in his field, and he'll be sharing his insights into the kind of groundbreaking research and development happening in our region. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Owen Guy.
Thank you, Brandon. Good evening, everybody. Pleasure to be with you this evening on a Monday in December. So thanks for attending, and we're going to learn a little bit about the semiconductor diet tonight. And what do I mean by that? Hopefully you can all see my slides. Yes, Brandon? Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, David. The semiconductor diet, what does that mean for us? Chips for everyone, okay? Chips for everyone. Semiconductor chips, okay? So what is a semiconductor chip? Well, we can see an example over here. There's a chip. You may have seen it. If you open up your phone or if you open up your laptop, your tablet, you will see something like that inside. And inside that, because that's a packaged chip, you will have a piece of silicon or a piece of new materials like Brandon's just mentioned, which are called compound semiconductors. So we'll learn a little bit about what these semiconductors are, how they're made, and some of the applications that they go into these days. A little bit of an advert, Swansea University. So Swansea University, this is our new semiconductor centre. So right in the middle, that white building is our Centre for Integrative Semiconductor Materials. It's a £60 million facility. And if you would like to visit us, and learn more about what we do there, learn more about semiconductors and semiconductor materials and the industry in South Wales, then you're very welcome. To all the lecturers and teachers on the call, feel free to visit us and bring your students as well. Swansea, of course, the most touristy destination in Wales, this beautiful beachfront situation, okay? Now, semiconductors. Why semiconductors important? Well, semiconductors are actually the fourth biggest industry in the world today, worth around $650 billion per annum. And they also feed heavily into the second biggest industry, which is represented there by the car, so automotive. And of course, automotive, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles that we'll see in the future are using these semiconductor devices, and particularly some compound semiconductors and next generation semiconductors. So applications where semiconductors use, smartphones, obviously, electric vehicles, but also in phone chargers, vacuum cleaners, anything electronic these days has semiconductors inside it. Okay, and some of the things that we might not associate with semiconductors, but artificial intelligence, cloud computing, these are powered, the hardware that powers them is based on semiconductor devices. Internet of Things, so sensors, connected sensors, artificial intelligence, I've mentioned, augmented reality, virtual reality, robotics, all this is made possible by semiconductor devices. Okay, so brief look at the smartphone now. And this is part of a lecture I give about the chemistry of the smartphone, but a wider lecture about the chemistry of everything, because chemistry is central to everything. Physics is also important, engineering is also important. But let's have a look at some key elements. Lithium. Where is lithium important? Well, lithium is critical for battery. So battery applications, increasingly battery-powered systems and electric vehicles, obviously using batteries now, but semiconductors and batteries, the combination of those two technologies is really important. Another important material, carbon. Why? Because carbon is the backbone of life. It's also fossil fuels, but that leads us on to this third element that we're going to consider, which is silicon. Okay, silicon is really important for the semiconductor industry, but also for energy generation in terms of solar cells and the efficient conversion of energy and transmission and distribution. So generating energy from a solar cell, but converting that into a useful electronic energy that we can use and we can store that energy. That uses silicon devices. We'll see later on that we can also use different materials, semiconductor materials called compound semiconductors. Okay, and these are what are being developed in South Wales in the compound semiconductor cluster. Okay, so silicon. What is silicon? Where does it come from? So if you take some sand, sand is silicon dioxide, so silicon combined with oxygen. If you reduce that, so if you get rid of the oxygen, you can end up with silicon. If you can then purify that, melt it up, you can get electronic grade silicon, which we can use as wafers. And you see a wafer there with devices on it. Okay, so that's the basis of our semiconductor technology. That process is illustrated here. We've developed a little animation called the Sand to Semiconductor Experience. And if you visit us in Swansea, you can view this as a virtual reality experience. But it's also available online, and we can send the link out via Brandon later on. Okay. So semiconductor technology relies on switches or transistors. Okay, and this is an example of a transistor. We can see how this transistor works, but essentially it allows you to control current flow. You can switch this transistor on or off. So how does that transistor work? What are the constituent parts, components of that transistor? So we start off with the semiconductor. So that's represented in blue. Then we have two regions of doping. So the semiconductor in blue has a different doping to the semiconductor regions in green. So what does that mean? It means that the semiconductor in blue contains different impurity atoms. So the impurities in the blue semiconductor might be aluminium, for instance, whereas the green regions have elements like nitrogen or arsenic. Okay, so the semiconductor device has three components: the source and the drain. And then the third component is the gate. Now, what we want to do in this semiconductor device is flow electrons from the source to the drain. They can only flow when we turn the gate of the device on. Okay, and that's represented in this little animation here. So we apply a voltage to the gate, and that creates a channel underneath the gate and a pathway for electrons to flow from the source to the drain. So those arrows represent the flow of electrons from the source under the gate to the drain. Okay, when we turn that gate off, so we turn the voltage off, then we remove that channel and no current flows. Okay, so that transistor allows current to flow through the device. Semiconductor technologies, as well as transistors, incorporate other kinds of devices. And an example of that is MEMS technology, micro electromechanical systems. Now, these are tiny little machines, but they're made using the same process technology, the same manufacturing technology as transistors. And on this slide, we see some examples of MEMS devices. So on the left-hand side, we have a sort of cog and wheel structure. In the middle, we have a gyroscope, which could be used in a smartphone to tilt. When we tilt the phone, the screen rotates. And then on the left, on the far left, top right, we have an example of microphone membrane made out of silicon, which vibrates, and that can give us sound. Okay. You'll see on the bottom left image, you'll see the legs there of a dust mite. And that dust mite is there really just to give us an idea of the scale of these MEMS devices. So they're micro-sized. A human hair is 70 microns in width, in diameter. Okay, so the dust mite is very, very small indeed. It's in your bed probably, but you can't see it. It's that small. So that gives you some idea of the scale of these MEMS devices. Okay, how do we create a MEMS device? How do we create a transistor? Well, the starting point is the silicon wafer. So we can see the silicon wafer on the left, that gray disc. And to turn that into a semiconductor device, we have to create a pattern on that wafer. That pattern is created using a process called lithography. So it's a little bit similar to photography process where you take a photo, or in the old days, you would have film in your camera. You take a photo, you would expose that film to light, and that would change the film. And it would create a pattern on the film. And when you develop that film, you would then create the photo pattern. So this is a little bit similar in terms of the principle of creating that pattern on this wafer surface. Okay, so first of all, to understand this patterning process, we need to understand a few concepts. We need to understand light, that it's an electromagnetic wave, and that electromagnetic spectrum is composed of different energy light waves. So we have visible light, and we have ultraviolet light, we have infrared, we have radio waves, microwaves. The light that we're going to use to create this pattern is UV light, ultraviolet light. Okay. The second concept we need to understand is polymers. What are polymers? Polymers are long chain organic molecules made up of smaller chain units. And the third concept is that we can use light to stimulate photochemical reactions. So this is a light-induced chemical reaction. For example, using light to polymerize that molecule on the screen, that small molecule there, that molecule is called ethene. If we hit that with light, it reacts with other ethene molecules to form a polymer called polyethylene. Why am I telling you this? What's plastic bags got to do with semiconductors? Well, it's not this particular polymer, but when you create a polymer, you change the solubility. So that ethene molecule is more soluble. This polymer molecule is less soluble. So we used light to create a change in solubility. So this is the reaction. This polymerization reaction that I'm showing now is an example of where we use a photochemical reaction to cross-link, to bind two different polymer chains and create a change in solubility. So the two chains on the left are soluble. We use light, photochemical reaction to create the linked, cross-linked polymer on the right-hand side of the slide, which is now less soluble. So we can change the solubility of that polymer. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to change the solubility. Different types of polymers behave in different ways. So you can use some types of polymers which become less soluble, some types of polymers which become more soluble. So when we expose this polymer to light, it's going to react, cause a change in solubility. We can then pattern that polymer layer to form a pattern on the wafer surface. So that's what's happening there. We're exposing the polymer to light, then we're developing it, and we're creating this pattern on the wafer surface. Okay, let's see that illustration. So this blue disc is the silicon wafer. Onto that, we're going to pour this photoactive polymer. There it goes. We're going to spin the disc so it spreads out as a thin film. Then we're going to introduce our photo mask. Here it comes. We're going to expose that UV light, remove the mask. Then we're going to develop that film. There's a developer coming in now. And you can see we've removed part of the polymer where we exposed to UV light. Okay, so we expose those UV light, those regions, those windows there to UV, and then we've been able to remove that polymer, that exposed polymer, with a developer solution. Okay. Okay, so this is a little quiz I like to play with some of the students. What are these structures? Well, they're parts, components of a smartphone. Okay, all these are made using semiconductor process technology, and they all go into the smartphone. So we've got speakers, we've got microphones, we've got gyroscopes. We can also make components like the lens for the camera. Okay, that's made using similar semiconductor process technology. And then we've got devices a little bit more specialist now, and this is where we specialize in South Wales. This is what they call the VCSEL device, which is a kind of laser. And that type of laser is used in the smartphone for the facial recognition function. Okay, and these types of VCSEL devices, the materials used in those VCSEL devices, they're made in Wales. Okay, so Wales specializes in the materials used to create these lasers for facial recognition devices. That same technology or similar technology is also being used in autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles. Okay, we will see these in the future, if not right now, but we will see these in the future. We'll all be riding around in self-drive taxis. Another type of semiconductor technology used in smartphones is the displays, the screens, and they use a technology called OLEDs, or organic light emitting diodes. Okay, so it's a different type of semiconductor material used for displays because it's thin, it's light, okay, and it emits light. It's lightweight, but it also emits light. And I always show this slide because these are the OLED, the state-of-the-art OLED displays back in 2005, and probably some people on the call will have been born in 2005, or maybe even a bit later than that. So this is the kind of state-of-the-art when you were born, or just before you were born, and you can see how far we've progressed in terms of display technology. We've got flexible displays, and we've got now these huge 85, 100-inch screens that you can buy in shops. Okay, what has powered that evolution, that development of technology? Well, one of the things that is behind it is Moore's law, okay, or the technology that drives Moore's law. So Moore's law, named after Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, that states that the number of transistors in an integrated circuit doubles about every 2 years. Okay, and what does that mean? That means the number of transistor devices on a silicon chip or on a semiconductor chip doubles approximately every 2 years. Okay, so each of those squares you see on the wafer there, each of those is an individual semiconductor chip, and the number of transistors on that chip has doubled as we progress in time. So a little illustration, let's say in 2005 we had 4 devices per chip, then 2 years later we had 16, well, it's more than double actually, that's 4 years later, 16, then 64, and then so on. Today's semiconductor chips, state-of-the-art semiconductor chips, the devices used in the latest smartphones, the individual components, the size of those is 3 nanometers. Okay, 3 nanometers, 3 billionths of a meter. Okay. Okay, each of those devices, the component that is 3 nanometers is this gate, this semiconductor gate. So this is the transistor. I'm going to play this image. So this shows you how that transistor operates. So that sort of flowing line there of yellow electrons, that's electrons flowing from one side, the source, to the drain of the transistor. That sort of silver block in the middle, which is turning red, that's the gate of the transistor. So when it turns red, the transistor is turning off. So the gate of the transistor is turning off. Okay, so hopefully we should see that turn red again at some point. There you go. So you can see the electron flow has then turned off. Transistor is able to turn on and off very, very frequently. Okay, very, very fast. Now, as we've moved and developed in technology, we've moved from what we call planar transistors, which was the illustration you've just seen, to what we call FinFET transistors. Okay, and the fabrication process, the manufacturing process for FinFET transistors, we can see on this slide. I'm not going to go into it in detail. I'm just going to tell you how the FinFET works. Okay, so there's the FinFET. You've got a source, you've got a drain, and you've got a gate. But you'll notice that the gate part of the device is a fin, and it's surrounded by the gate on all three sides, whereas in the planar transistor, it was surrounded only on one side. Okay, so that means this FinFET transistor can turn on and off much more efficiently. Why is that important? Well, it means that the switching of that transistor uses less power. That means your battery life in your smartphone lasts longer. Okay, so transistors are getting smaller, but also they're using less energy, less battery power, so our battery lasts longer. Here's a device. That blue is showing the blocking of the transistor channel. So the device is now turned off. Okay, so let's get an idea of scale of these things and how small is 3 nanometers. Well, we've got an ant there. An ant is probably a couple of millimeters in size. In the sort of center there, we've got a red blood cell. That's 5 microns. Okay. Then on the left, we have a virus. A virus is about 50 nanometers, 50 billionths of a meter. A human hair on the bottom right, that's about 70 microns, so about 10 times larger than the width of that is 10 times larger than a red blood cell diameter. But then you go to the transistor devices I was talking about, 3 nanometers. So that's approximately 15 to 20 times smaller than a virus particle. Okay, so extremely small indeed. Okay, here are the evolution of the transistor or FET, field effect transistor devices. And let's see how they work. So this is the planar transistor. That's the sort of first generation device. There it goes. There's the current flowing under the gate. The second generation is the FinFET. Now the gate surrounds the channel on 3 sides. Okay, so that switches more efficiently. That gate is thinner. We now move to the next generation where the gate surrounds the channel on all 4 sides. That technology is called gate all around. Okay, GAA, gate all around technology. And then the next generation after that is called multi-barrier channel FET. So each of those channels has a source and drain. The gate surrounds the channel on all 4 sides, and that channel can switch on and off very efficiently indeed. There it goes. There's the current flow, and we can switch that current flow off and on using the gate. Okay, so FinFETs, multi-barrier channel FETs, the latest generation of technology. Okay, where do we go beyond that? Well, what's beyond 3 nanometers? What's smaller than 3 nanometers? Well, obviously 2 nanometers. Okay, so we can probably get to 2 nanometers using current technology. But if we want to get smaller than that, it becomes increasingly more and more difficult. And then we look at new technologies like 2D materials. And this is an example of a graphene transistor. So a graphene switch. Graphene is an atomic layer thick, so just one atomic layer of carbon atoms. And that means it's very thin. So it could be used in that multi-barrier channel field effect transistor technology. We could also use a technology called quantum devices or quantum computing. And that involves qubits or quantum bits where instead of moving electrons around, we can change things like the spin of an electron. We can change the state of that electron spin, and that electron spin can adopt multiple energy levels, which are quantized, and hence the name qubit. Okay, so that's way ahead. That's a few years ahead. That technology is being developed in research right now, but it's going to take some time for us to adopt that in real applications. Okay, I just want to now illustrate how far computing and semiconductors have come. So I'm going to take you back to 1969, the Apollo 11 moon landing. At that time, early computers were less powerful than a modern toaster. Okay, so your smartphone today is millions, if not trillions of times more powerful than the Apollo 11 era computers. So just a little illustration here. How many of those calculations can you do in 5 seconds? Maybe some people can do 1 or 2. Maybe some people can do all 8. Okay, but probably not many more than that. So you may be on average able to do 5 calculations or 5 operations per in 5 seconds, so one per second. Your iPhone 6 back in the day could do something like 3.5 billion operations per second using 1.6 billion transistors. So 120 million times faster than the Apollo 11 computers. The iPhone 12, that had 600 billion operations per second, was able now to do facial recognition, voice recognition, okay, and its neural engine topped 11 trillion operations per second. The iPhone 15 Pro Max, 19 billion transistors, 35 trillion operations per second, 10% faster than the previous iPhone. Okay, and of course, today we've got the latest iPhones, which are even more powerful. Okay, Brandon mentioned the semiconductor cluster, compound semiconductor cluster and CSconnected. I just want to give you an idea of the geography and the companies involved in that cluster. So we obviously have Cardiff University, Swansea University. We have companies in Cardiff, IQE, in Newport, Vichy, which is the Newport Wafer Fab, Vichy Newport. We have SPTS KLA, okay, which is near the Celtic Manor. And we have Microchip in Caldecott. We have CSconnected. We have the Compound Semiconductor Center. And we also have the Compound Semiconductor Applications Catapult. And together we form the Compound Semiconductor Cluster. Okay, there's a little picture of Vichy, which is the UK's biggest semiconductor factory, semiconductor fab. We call it fabrication facility. Okay, and that's a really important site in South Wales, as is the KLA and IQA and Microchip sites. This is a picture of an animation of our new centre at Swansea, which you can come and have a look at. You're very welcome to come and have a look at. And now I want to delve a little bit more into applications, because transistors not only used in smartphones technology, but they're also used in power electronics for electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, as we've seen, cloud computing, AI, Internet of Things, and also healthcare applications. And this is something we develop a lot of technology around in Swansea. So we develop biosensors, we develop microfluidics. So the example there, we see this again. You can see on the bottom right, we have an image of a microfluidic device. That is blood being pumped through the device, and the main channel carries blood. The white and red blood cells in the blood are filtered off into these side channels, these smaller channels that you can see there. Okay, so that's a blood separation device, which we can use for biosensing. Why do we want to separate the cells out of that? Well, if you think about using an optical technology, the red blood cells, they strongly absorb light. Okay, so they're going to interfere with our signal. If we're detecting light emitted from that blood sample, then we want to remove the blood cells so we get a much clearer optical signal. So Semiconductor technologies can be used in sensing. They can be used in smart drug delivery or vaccine patches. Smart vaccine patches, which again we're developing here at Swansea. Medical imaging techniques and remote healthcare, okay, point-of-care testing. Okay, so there's some illustrations of some sensor devices. Example, some kind of blood glucose monitor, some kind of optical eye implant, and also some kind of viral detection sensor. Okay. At Swansea, we're developing technology like this. We can detect markers for prostate cancer, for oxidative stress, which is a general cancer marker, but we can also detect things like the COVID virus. Okay. And this is an example of a graphene device, a graphene sensor that's been developed at Swansea. This particular device was developed to detect the hepatitis virus, hepatitis B, and also hepatitis C. Okay. Some of the more advanced technologies that we're developing include things like the electronic nose. Okay, so this is able to detect different scents, which are a scent is essentially a smell made up of volatile organic compounds. Okay, how do we do that? Well, we can use devices, MEMS devices like these bridge structures, which change their oscillation frequency in response to a particular organic molecule. But we can also use a graphene sensor, an array of graphene sensors, and that's something we've developed here at Swansea to detect different organic compounds. One of the other things we develop in terms of the healthcare sphere at Swansea is microneedle devices, and this is something we worked for several years on with SPTS or KLA in Newport. And you can see there we've got some microneedles. These can be turned into patches and they can be used for drug delivery through the skin or for vaccine delivery. Why would you deliver drugs through the skin? Why not just take a tablet? Well, there's benefits in delivering that drug through the skin because you can use a smaller dose, and also you might avoid going through the stomach where a lot of the drug is lost. So the efficacy of delivery through the skin can be better. In addition, if you're talking about vaccine delivery, the cells, the Langerhans cells in the skin compartment, they respond to the vaccine, okay, in a very effective way. So you can use a lower dose of the vaccine. You can also apply these patches yourself. So heaven forbid, if we have another pandemic, then we could, instead of queuing up at the hospital on Fabian Way for an injection, we could have these vaccine patches posted to us, and we could potentially put them on ourselves and deliver the vaccine ourselves. These microneedles can also be used in cosmetic applications to treat the fine lines under the eye, for example. Okay, so another application, this is a diabetes smart patch. So this is technology we developed in Swansea University, and not only could you detect the levels of glucose in the skin with this patch, but you could also then potentially deliver insulin into the skin. So it was a diagnostic combined with a therapeutic device. That, of course, was inspired by the mosquito proboscis. And the whole point of these microneedles is that they're so small that you don't feel the microneedle inserting into the skin, just like you don't feel the mosquito proboscis injecting itself into your skin. Okay, so the microneedles could be relatively pain-free and much less unpleasant than being injected by a hypodermic needle. This is the microneedle process that we developed with SPTS KLA. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but essentially you produce a pattern on the wafer, then you can etch into the wafer using equipment that is made in Newport. Okay. This is the etch illustration of the etch process. So you've got reactive gas molecules in what they call a plasma. Those bombard the surface of the silicon wafer. There it goes. They react with the silicon and they form a volatile product, which you can then pump away using a vacuum pump. So essentially, you're etching, removing parts of the silicon wafer. Okay, so this is the process. Expose the photoresist, remove that photoresist, develop it, then etch into the silicon wafer, and eventually you form these microneedles. The microneedles can be used to inject through, so we can pump a liquid through. We can also use to pump cells through, and this is something we developed with Cardiff University. You could actually pump cells into the skin. Why would you want to do that? Well, the reason was you could treat a disease or condition called vitiligo. So this is an absence of skin pigmentation. So the idea was that you could culture healthy skin pigment cells called melanocytes and then inject them using microneedles into the depigmented areas. Okay, so cosmetic applications, patches. Okay, and I'll finish at that point. But the last thing to mention really is that there are plenty of opportunities. As Brandon mentioned earlier, there are plenty of opportunities in the semiconductor industry, both in South Wales and globally. We're dealing with partners from Arizona, from Vietnam, from Germany, from France, okay, all from Japan, all across the globe. It's a global industry. It's a massive industry. So if you want to study semiconductors, do STEM subjects at school, at college, then go either straight into the industry or do a degree in a STEM subject, preferably, and then transition into the jobs, either, as I say, in South Wales or around the globe. So lots of opportunities for smart young people with translatable skills. And I'm going to finish at that point.
Yeah, thank you very much, Owen. I think it was a very informative talk. I want to thank you for your time as well. Just to open the floor up to anyone in the call, and is there any questions for either myself at CSconnected or Owen, I guess, as an academic partner? No? Okay, I think Owen must have covered everything. Thank you all for your time and joining this call. This is the first of what we hope to be every term, a new call with new industry partners, whether they're academic research partners or it is someone from industry, an engineer to talk to you about the day in the life. We'll hope this has been informative enough to you guys to actually join more or spread the word with your fellow students or your fellow colleagues to jump on board. At the end of this, we will be kind of hoping to send out a feedback form, and I can only ask you very nicely if you wouldn't mind filling that out and get it back to us, just so we can build this better for you in the future. And I think that's it, us from CSconnected all done. Unless there's any questions you'd like to check in the chat or check your hand up, feel free. If not, thank you very much for joining. And thank you very much, Owen.
Pleasure, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Yeah, so I think the video is going to be available. Brandon, do you make the video available, will you?
Yes, so we are recording. We'll probably just clip it down just to make sure everything is correct in there. And then I believe we'll probably be sharing it with your heads of engineering or your lecturers just to share out with the schools. And potentially we might even just send it out with email as well, just so you all have access to that. Oh, and there's a question, if you don't mind going back to the slide showing the process of lithography.
Yeah, sure.
It's obviously very in-depth, very technical presentation.
Which one? This one or this one?
Let me just double check. Jayesh, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Which slide? Was it this one? The one before.
This one, yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
I believe it's that one.
So we can send a PDF as well out, Brandon, if people wanted to. So there are some YouTube links on there as well.
Yeah, if you're happy with that, I don't mind sharing that out as well. Yeah, Jayesh says thank you. So thanks again for that, Owen. Again, really appreciate the slides.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so we'll probably send out the PDF files, feedback form, and the recording as well, hopefully with your tutors.
Yeah. No problem.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll, if there's no other questions, I'll end the call. I believe we're bang on time as well. So thank you all. Thank you, Owen.
Pleasure.